Well, hello guys. It is David Vos and another day in Alabama with sunshine and beautiful weather. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Well, I promised you I'd get back to you with some part two of this Who Runs the World. And we promised also that we would give you some juicy stuff. I know a lot of you are kind of looking forward. I suppose, I'm hoping there are some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and I know there are a few. I hope there's a lot, because this will really be informative for individuals who might be a little curious because maybe they once were a Jehovah's Witness, or for those of you who have had family or people you know, because I don't think that you're going to have heard, even if you had been a Jehovah's Witness, I don't think you're going to have heard the information that I'm going to share with you today. But as is par for the course and, usual with me, I do want to give you a little bit of an introduction. But I do promise that within a very short little span here, I'm going to get into some juicy stuff. Some stuff that, I'm saying juicy because that's, I know one of you was saying, I hope you get to the juicy stuff. Well, we are. But in actuality, let's just call it for what it is. We're going to get into some information that I'm going to call one of the greatest revelations that I've ever had. Even though it's hard for me to make that claim because I've had some big revelations in my life. I mean, it's just like boom, boom, boom. I've been learning these amazing things. And it's been blowing my mind. It's amazing what happens when you kind of open your mind up a little bit and start thinking and praying and asking the Lord for guidance, because really the Lord is willing to give us the information that we need and in the hour, and we need to know it. And I think we need to know it. I think the hour has come. But so I'm going to tell you some things that I don't think it's actually in my own way of thinking, and the way it looks to me, it's like I don't even know how they were able to cover this up. I don't know how we could. It's like staring at the big white elephant in the room and nobody seems to know he's there. I don't know how they do that. Like, I can't even imagine how I could not have seen it. Although, you see, this is what I want to tell you, that I did see it, but it's like, no, don't believe your lying eyes, Dave. I knew this was all about politics. I didn't, they wanted you to believe it's about religion and preaching the gospel and all this stuff, but I could see something was going on. And I want to tell you a little story, just maybe a couple of stories before we get into the juicy stuff. Please don't skip over this first part, because I want to share with you probably some things. They're almost as important as the actual facts themselves. Is how I came to understand and how I woke up. Because the process of waking up is probably almost more important than the information itself, because it's the waking up that allows us to even know this information to start with. So as you guys know, I lived all over the world. Probably, basically. We just traveled around. And at one point, we went to a little place called Montpelier, Idaho. And if you look there on your map, I even got a little picture for you, just so you know where we're talking about. It's just up in the mountains. Well, it's actually real close to Utah and Wyoming. It's kind of like in the Three Corners area. And, there's a picture of this, something seared into my mind. We used to come down this. It's like an overpass there that you kind of go over the railroad tracks and come into town, and boom, there's a little town, and there's the M Hill for Montpelier. Yeah, that M Hill is kind of interesting. I went back years ago, and there was some guy in a white dress on top of the mountain, thought he was the bride of Christ, and he was going to wait up on M Hill for the coming of the Lord. There's crazies everywhere in the world, friends. But if you take a look right straight down that street, right where that blue sign is on the right, and you go down, I think it was right there at the bottom of the bridge to the right, that white building. But in that area, there was a place that my father worked. Now, what you're seeing there is Soda Springs. that water right there, it's like a little geyser. It's about 30 miles from Montpelier. I'll get back to what I'm saying here. There's a little town called Soda Springs. And I like that town. My brother lived there and his wife. I think that's where he met his wife. But, it was a little town near there. And my dad worked there, and so we lived there too. I mean, when I was very young, about 6 years old, the first time we actually went there. But that little geyser thing is full of soda water. There's a well there, you could dip it out and pour your cup of the soda water and put some Kool-Aid in it, and you'd have soda water. You know, it tastes like soda. We used to do that. Anyway, and yeah, I even thought, well, I wonder if our old homestead's there. So I looked on Google, and I'll be darned, that's where I lived. Not really the fondest memories. I mean, Mom and Dad split up in that house. That was when I was 15 years old. And Dad had already grown the beard. I was 13 and 14. From Bonners Ferry, Idaho, we moved down here to the southern Idaho back again. Because I had been there when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. Now we came back. But this is a town near Montpelier called Paris, Idaho. And this was the old homestead that Mom and Dad bought. Now, it's changed a little bit since we lived there, as many years ago. It's a little dilapidated now, and it looks like the yard's kind of going to pot. But Mom painted it pink when we were there. But anyway, I digress. The reason I'm telling you this is because a very interesting thing happened to me on the way to the theater, as they say. Well, actually, my mind's kind of blank right now. I don't remember that old saying anyway. On the way to something. But, yeah, we were definitely on the way to something. And I was 15 years old. That house is where I basically last saw my father as my father. And I remember Mom left to go back to northern Idaho. And so that was kind of the end of life as a young man, as a child. I was 15. I had to go out and get a job. And, you know, I had never went back to school. Actually, I quit school when I was like 13. But, yeah, if you look behind that old homestead kind of thing, kind of see what looks like maybe a hill back in there. Boy, there's some hills. It goes up into some mountains if you keep going. I used to walk with my dog. I had a dog named Rusty. Used to belong to my brother, but it was a beautiful Irish setter. Loved the dog, and he'd go with me, and we'd go rabbit hunting. But, you know, kind of some good memories and a lot of bad memories. And I basically would go and hike the mountains for hours and hours and hours just to get away from the idea that I was about to lose everything that I'd ever understood or knew. So those are some memories for sure. But I'm bringing this up because this was the road to my awakening, you know, at that young age. And I have a memory that I need to share with you that is something to do with what I want to explain to you today. So, not far from this little area, there was it's in Montpelier is where it was actually located originally. And it was a little company called NJL Helmet. Now, when my dad moved there, he got a job for this helmet factory because it was a Jehovah's Witness that owned it. Now, this was the largest employer probably in the area. I mean, he employed a lot of people. And then my dad worked for him for quite a while, was helping him because he was an electrician. And my dad had learned to be an electrician years ago when we would back in California, and he used to work at this big sawmill. Actually, it was like a sawmill that was like two sawmills on both ends of town. It was a large, huge sawmill in California, up in Forest Hill, California. And he became an apprentice electrician there at the sawmill. So that gave him a little bit of an advantage when he would go and get work and stuff, because he had this information, this knowledge on, you know, he was a mechanic. He could do electrical work. He could out physically work anyone. So Dad was always getting a job somewhere, and they would use him to like a horse, basically, to build their business and make all the money. So, the guy that ran this was a Jehovah's Witness. Now, I believe he wasn't really a Jehovah's Witness. He barely ever came to the meetings. But his wife and children came all the time. Now, my dad was the elder and the overseer of that congregation, so he kind of had to respect my dad, even though he was this big, millionaire or whatever. And he knew my dad had, a lot of talent and stuff, and he needed his expertise to help him build this company into it ended up becoming the largest helmet factory in the world. They outsold Bell Helmet. Now, the reason I tell you this is a couple of reasons. First of all, I looked it up on the internet to see if I could find some pictures on Google Images. And I'll be darned, I looked for hours and I couldn't find any record of NJL helmet whatsoever. And since it was the largest helmet factory in the world at that time, and it was only wasn't that many years ago, I thought, now that's pretty strange. Because you see, this is important, what I'm telling you, because we're going to find out later on why no one can understand or figure out why Jehovah's Witnesses, who they are, and that they don't know that they're holding all of these big companies. That the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society owns these multi-companies all over the world, one of which, we'll talk about later some of the companies they own, one of which is the New Holland Tractor Company. Kind of like, John Deere. Well, this is the New Holland. They're very big. If you go anywhere in a farming community, you'll see New Holland tractors and combines and whatever. And, they make all kinds of vehicles of every kind and engines and stuff like this. One of the major, right up there with like International and John Deere and all of this, is a huge company. So they own lots of different companies. But you'll never know that. They hide it. And you can go on the internet. This is proof in point that you can go on the internet. I actually challenge you to go on the internet and find some evidence of this NJL helmet factory. Even though it was the largest, it's like they just popped up out of nowhere with the help of my father. And he literally, because they moved it out to a little town near there, Paris, where we had that little house. And Dad, during that last year, I was about 14, 15 years old. That's where Dad was working. And they took over this sort of a brick building out in the middle of nowhere. It was I guess it was an old milk factory. I mean, it was a big building, very, very large, had a big basement, and, it's like a big warehouse, and it was all made out of brick. And there was no electrical, there was no plumbing, nothing. My dad literally went in there and built that into a helmet factory with the help of other individuals as well. There were some other Jehovah's Witnesses he brought in that were engineers and stuff like that. But most of the work was done by my dad, just with what he knew about electrical and plumbing and mechanical and all. Dad did a lot of work for this man. And because of what my dad did, that factory, when it got up and running, started outselling every other helmet factory in the world. And I think it's very important because it's going for 10 years or so, and then it's gone, and you don't even have a record of it. And that's exactly what happened with the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. That's their modus operandi. They will own companies under, first of all, they put it under as a religion, so you don't have to pay taxes. So it's under the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. And of course, they're protected by the elite. Because they are the elite, as we're going to show you here in a minute. They are the elite. So they're protected. And they can do this without any, it's like Trump, he's went bankrupt several times, and you're like, what's going on? Why did he go bankrupt? How do you go bankrupt in Atlantic City with this big casino? You're hosting all the big fights, like with Mike Tyson, and these big fights. You can't go bankrupt doing something like that. Well, Donald Trump used that company to pretend he went bankrupt, to shift money into other companies, and it disappears, and he puts it in his pocket, or he pays off his friends, or whatever, puts it into a big building, or whatever. We don't know what's the shifting cups, right? Where'd the little pebble go? This is how it works. This is what they do. So what Charles Taze Russell did was he incorporated several companies. Most people only know the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. He had other companies that were under his umbrella of this religious no taxes and everything. And he had certain individuals that were Jehovah's Witnesses, Russellites at the time, International Bible Students Association. That was one of his umbrella organizations. And they ended up having all of these real estate companies and buying all of this stuff and buildings. And that's how he ended up getting really this big Watchtower building on over the Brooklyn Bridge. He purchased this stuff with financial backing from the elite because Russell was one of the elite bloodlines. As we've said before, he was writing to the Rothschild letters. We've got letters that he wrote to Rothschild. He was friends with these individuals. And probably was one of the wealthiest people in those days, but no one ever knew that. They say the man was penniless. They say Charles Taze Russell was penniless. But that's because all of his money was under the protection of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. And so he would have these individuals that were part of the little family. They were not working individually, but working for the goal of the elite to bring in the one world government. So they all had to do what they were told, but they already signed it in blood somewhere in their sacred temple. By the way, Jehovah's Witnesses did build a temple in Brooklyn, not too far from the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. They did purchase a building, and then they renovated it and built a literal temple. That's where they used to show the photo drama. And so anyway, we're going to get into some really amazing things here in a minute and tell you the companies that he owned and things that he did and show you how they ended up in Los Angeles and created Hollywood. We'll get to that. But I want to show you how I woke up to this and the things that began to sort of dawn on me. So here I am, a young man, 15. My dad's creating this big company. The guy's a Jehovah's Witness. He's not really a Jehovah's Witness. He's a real cranky, mean, wicked man. He used to beat his wife. My dad had to literally sit on the, as the judge. And this woman would come, my husband's beating me. And anyone else, they would have disfellowshipped him. But since they were employed by this man, all the elders were employed by this man, they couldn't disfellowship him. And that bothered me when I was a young man too. And my dad even said that. He said, he had voted to disfellowship him. But the other two you have to have 3 elders to vote. And my dad voted to disfellowship the man, I guess, because he did beat his wife quite a few times. And the other 2 brothers, who also were elders and worked for the company, they vetoed his vote. So I remember hearing all of this growing up. And but what puzzles me is that today you will never find any record of that existing anywhere. So while we were in this little town of Montpelier, Idaho, I remember I was about 11 years old. So this was probably a few years before this when we were there the first time. And I remember in Montpelier, Idaho, this young man, or wasn't really a young man, a man probably in his 50s, moved into the congregation there in Montpelier. And he announced to everyone that he was a big shot from Hollywood. And he had all these reel-to-reel tapes, movie, film, in these reel-to-reel things. And he had this movie projector. And he had all the movies, Marlon Brando and John Wayne and all these movies. And so we would have these big get-togethers. And this man was a great talker. He was appeared to be very intellectual, and he was always very cordial and happy, and he was sort of entertaining us, and telling us these stories about how, he worked down there in Hollywood, knows all the stars, he knew all the people, and according to him, Jehovah's Witnesses ran Hollywood. And I remember hearing that when I was a kid, but I don't think anybody really took it seriously. I thought a lot of people just kind of maybe thought he was just talking, but hey, free movies and popcorn, so whatever, right? I remember we'd go down into this one family that lived there. They let him stay in the basement or something, gave him a little apartment down there. So we'd go over there, and quite a few members of the congregation would go over there sometimes, and he had this, like a little movie room, and he served popcorn, and they'd drink soda or whatever, pizza, I don't know, and we'd watch these movies. Well, one day, he said he was going back to Hollywood. And my mother, of course, wanted to go to Hollywood, or, you know, to Los Angeles as often as she could to visit her mom, my grandma. And she wanted to visit her sister. And so it was like, what an opportunity. So this guy, you know, he was always befriending my mom. And I think he kind of liked my mom. And that's another thing I always bothered me. I thought, why did my dad not get jealous? I mean, Dad never acted jealous or anything. But I thought, man, you know, this guy's kind of being a little friendly, and he wants to take me and Mom to California. Of course, I didn't really worry about that because I knew that my mother would never... Mom just wasn't like that. She would have probably knocked him flat out if he'd have made a move, you know. But see, she went ahead and said, sure, I'll go along. So me and Mom got in the car with this man, and he drove us all the way to Hollywood. And he told the biggest stories. I mean, I was just a kid, and he was just entertaining me. I mean, I was like 11 years old, and the man, he was very nice to me. He was just like, I don't know if he was a pedophile or what, but I started feeling a little uncomfortable a little bit at times. But anyway, I heard a lot of stories along the way about how Jehovah's Witnesses ran Hollywood. Again, most people just went in one ear and out the other. They didn't believe him. Now, as I grew up, I think around the year when I was about 17, and I was in Roseville, California, the outskirts of suburbs of Sacramento, staying with my aunt. I remember also a memory of how it was something going around amongst Jehovah's Witnesses there. That John Denver, now this was my favorite singer. He had been my favorite singer. I got a guitar. Mom bought me a guitar when I was young, and I ended up getting my first 8-track tape, and the first 8-track tape I ever got was of John Denver. And it was just by chance. I didn't even know who he was. Popped that thing in my 8-track player and listened and fell in love with his songs, and basically by ear, I learned all of his songs. So he was a big thing in my heart, and a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses would know that, because we'd go to get-togethers, and they'd all want me to play the guitar, and I'd play John Denver, and it was a big deal back then. So this was going around about how John Denver used to go on the Johnny Carson show. In fact, I think for a while he even started hosting the Johnny Carson show. Well, at one point, there was like a little falling out between Johnny and John Denver, the two Johns. And most of the world didn't really know what it was. Well, there was a little story going on amongst Jehovah's Witnesses that the last time John Denver went on Johnny Carson's show, he came out, and Johnny says, now, before you sit down, John, or I mean, just maybe as he sat down, I don't know. He says, first thing I want to say is, I hear that you don't like Jehovah's Witnesses. And John Denver looked up and he said, well, no, I don't. I don't like him at all. And he said, well, I'll tell you, everybody that you see, the cameraman, my producer, everybody here is a Jehovah's Witness. And if you don't like Jehovah's Witnesses, maybe you should leave. And John Denver said, well, okay. And he says, I guess I will. And he got up and left. So that was the end of John Denver's career. Well, anyway, that's what I heard. That's what I was told for a long time. I don't know if it actually happened. Just like I don't know if we could trust this man from Hollywood that claimed that Jehovah's Witnesses ran Hollywood. But I thought, well, whatever, put it in the back of my mind and go on down the road. Well, it turns out it is true, friends. And this was the Lord and all these synchronicities that did this in my life, so that one day, I believe, as I got older, the Lord would be able to say, remember, this stuff is real. This isn't something, they can hide it. You can go back on the internet and try to find NJL helmet, and it may have disappeared, but you've got memories, Dave. I've tried to find this guy that was the president of AT&T, and I can't find any record of the man. Now, everything that these Jehovah's Witnesses do, you can find a record of it. So just in case somebody thinks that maybe I'm making all this up, I did scour for hours, and I found one clip or proof that NJL helmet actually existed. And I'm going to show it to you right here, just in case somebody gets the idea I'm making this up. Take a look at this. So, some guy, I found an obituary of some guy that died, I don't know, some years ago. It says he moved to Montpelier. He went to Cokeville, Wyoming, Bear Lake County, and all this stuff. During his years in Montana, he attended 2.5 years of mechanical engineering at Butte School of Mines in Butte. He met and married Judy Berland, and he had this daughter and that daughter. And he goes on down through here. It says he worked in many aspects in business for 25 years. And then it says he went, and following that, he worked 3 years for NJL Helmet Company in Paris, Idaho. There you go. Anywho, I find it odd that that company is not a figment of my imagination. It's real. I lived it. My dad went and worked there and built that company from the ground up. And my brother also worked for that company. I think maybe a couple of my brothers worked there. One of them worked there for a while. But to see that this company now does not exist as far as Google is concerned is proof for what I'm trying to say. So, here's, you say, well, how in the world could this company, Jehovah's Witnesses, how is it that they could be running the world? That doesn't even make sense. Well, it does. Here's the story. So remember, Charles Taze Russell died in 1916. So that was just after the war of World War I. Now, you probably heard that the people that run the world, as I've been saying for a long time, are these Bavarians from Germany. So what's this Russell connection? Well, remember, these Bavarians came over here in Project Paperclip. Now, Project Paperclip happened after World War II. But do you think these people just existed only after World War II? No, there were still individuals of this Bavarian Illuminati group that lived in Germany all the way up through, halfway through the war. And then we started getting them out of Germany in World War II and bringing them over here in Project Paperclip. However, they existed long before that. And that was actually the reason for World War I and everything. So, get out your Google and look it up if you need confirmation, but here is the evidence. You know that we've been talking about this guy named Crowley. He was the head of, basically the head of one of these Bavarians that was the head of the whole deal. He had disciples. I don't want to go too much into his group. We've talked about it so many times before. But some of his disciples was individuals like L. Ron Hubbard, who ended up making the Church of Scientology and running Hollywood. You know, not running it, but he's one of the groups that supplies Hollywood people. There are several groups involved with Hollywood, but the one who created it was Charles Taze Russell, and we'll prove that here in a minute. Well, so Crowley was a contemporary of Hitler and that age. So it came a little after Russell. So Russell was kind of before that. Well, Russell's right-hand man was this guy we talked about, the second president of the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, Judge Rutherford, Joseph Rutherford. Joseph Rutherford was another one of these Bavarians. Every one of them were, all the presidents of the Watchtower, Franz, Henschel, Knorr with a K. Those are Bavarian names, including Russell, whose name means the red and goes back to one of the greatest, highest bloodlines. It goes back, and basically it is a symbol for the fact that this is the line of Esau, the red one. And this is what even the Judeans today in the Talmud will tell you, that Esau created Rome. So it was a bloodline. The Apostle Paul says this. Remember, in Rome, they had 72 members on their Senate at the Capitolium, which is the capital, which we still have one here in Washington. We've got a capital in every county, right? In the United States and all over the world. They got Capitoliums. Those are temples. And they carry out a priesthood. We talked about that the other day. the priesthood of the flame, which is in this 100 movie. So, his right-hand man, in 1916, 2 weeks before Charles Taze Russell died, 2 weeks before he died, Russell sent Judge Rutherford to Los Angeles because they had a little gold mine. They owned a gold mine. It was somewhere in the area around Los Angeles, beyond Barstow, up around a little town called Baker. And there's a little lake there called Soda Lake. And it's kind of interesting because, remember, we were just talking about Soda Springs. Well, they call it Soda Springs, and then there's a Soda Lake. Well, on this Soda Lake, Charles Taze Russell started mining for gold and was digging up a lot of gold. They had a lot of money. I mean, lots of gold. They were also mining other things, potash and various whatevers. I don't know what they got, salt, different things that they were getting out of that area. They were just mining it, making a lot of money. Again, if you do any research, you'll find that that mine was shut down about the same time that Russell died. Well, do a little more research and you find it covered it up. That place was in operation till 1919, at least. Now, why would you run a gold mine and if it's not producing gold and you're covering it up and saying it doesn't exist, but it does? That is because they were making money, and like the little pebble under the cups and moving, the switchy-rooney thing, they were moving money between companies and corporations, and so nobody even knew that Charles Taze Russell owned a gold mine. They claimed he died penniless. Well, when he died, they went into his apartment and there was a safe, and it was like $3 million in the safe, right? So he wasn't penniless at all. Trust me. But you see, when you incorporate as a religious entity, you don't have to pay taxes, and he had all these different sort of corporations or whatever that he could hide his business dealings. He could say, I don't own anything. Nothing's in my name, right? And then he would have board of directors and individuals that were Russellites, right? Jehovah's Witnesses. And they would be, one of his right-hand men at that time that was doing all this financing and everything of Russell's was a guy named Cohen. Now, I keep telling you guys, that is one of these particular families that they're lawyers. If you go back into the Hebrew tongue, and Cohen means a priest. Some of them today call themselves Levi or Levi, and that, of course, means a Levite. So they're into being attorneys and lawyers and stuff like that. So this man Cohen was Russell's right-hand man along with the judge Rutherford. He was a judge. And Rutherford is also, if you trace his line back, his father, I've done this, and he goes back to Bavaria as well. But he was a judge. He was a very powerful, powerful man. So Russell, these guys were all working together. Russell sent him 2 weeks before he died to this gold mine, which is outside of Los Angeles. He was doing something, but nobody seems to understand what he was doing. All of a sudden, just days before Charles Taze Russell dies on Halloween, October the 31st, in a graveyard in Pampa, Texas. Like, what's he doing in Texas? Like, normally he spent all of his time in Brooklyn, or he would fly out to Los Angeles because they had another thing going over there, which we're going to find out here at Hollywood. So, my suspicion is that one of two things happened. And I'll tell you more about how many things Russell had his hand in and all the companies that he began and created in Hollywood and all that stuff here in a minute. But my suspicion is one of two things happened. Either Rutherford was trying to do a little takeover, kind of like Brigham Young did with Joseph Smith, and murdered him to take over the company. Like these things happen with these elite. Remember the Titanic when it sunk? It sunk because they were trying to get rid of the richest man in America. And he sunk on that ship. So they will murder each other sometimes to take over. So Judge Rutherford may have, because something really odd happened. Remember, supposedly Russell was so sick that he ended up dying on October the 31st, 1916. A week before that, he's on a plane or a train or something, and he meets Rutherford coming back from Los Angeles in the middle in Pampa, Texas. And on this hallowed night of the devil, right? Halloween night, he dies in a graveyard. He either pretended to die and made a ceremony, and which is probably why they got a big pyramid over his grave with the Masonic symbol. By the way, somebody pointed this out yesterday, and I looked it up, and it's true. I had never looked at Ellen G. White's grave. Well, that grave is also marked with a pyramid, only that kind that's tall, the obelisk. They're also kind of like pyramids, pillars, like the Pillar of Enoch. So she was also buried under a obelisk or something, like the Washington Monument. Very interesting. All these people were buried under pyramids and obelisks and stuff. I'd be curious to know where, Brigham Young's grave, what it looks like or something, and these other people. Who knows? But I think that either one, Rutherford and Russell were arguing about something, and they met in the middle to, talk it over or something. And some big powerful people maybe didn't agree with Russell on something, and they wanted to take him out, and they just murdered him on that particular day. They planned it, and then they made him into this great icon and worshipped him and put him in the, who knows. Or they just did it to fool everybody, because I don't think he was all that sick if he was running around the country doing business deals a week before he died. So on this one moment, October the 31st, Halloween night, he ends up dying. Maybe they just set it up to make it look like he died just so they could make him famous and immortal. And he bowed out, went to some island like with Jeff Epstein or something. Who knows? I really don't know. So why, though, would they go to that much trouble to kill that man? Just to take over the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society? Well, that might be enough, right? But, friends, there's more. I will actually put in the information box a link that you can go and verify everything I'm going to tell you. I came across this the other day, and people have just got to see this. We've got to get this out to the world. So, I can't go through the entire thing, every detail. First of all, I don't know all the details. I can't remember all the details. You'll have to read it yourself. But I will go over some of the main points. In 1914, about that time, I don't remember the exact date, Charles Taze Russell invented the very first motion picture. It's called the Photodrama of Creation. And ex-Jehovah's Witnesses might have heard about it. Most of the world has forgotten about it. See? They kind of hide these things because they don't want you to know that motion pictures was started by Charles Taze Russell. He was a millionaire, but if we were to find out how much he actually had then, it would have been in the millions and millions and millions. The company. In today's value, he'd be like a Bill Gates, a Jeff Bezos, or an Elon Musk. He was that big, but he was not one of these type of people that made himself famous or anything and didn't tell the world just how much he owned and what he was doing for whatever reason. I think it was just like Crowley. We don't know what Crowley did. Most people have no clue that Crowley had these disciples like L. Ron Hubbard and Anton LaVey, and that people that, like Parsons that started NASA, was a student of Crowley. Well, interesting, because Crowley lived in this little area in Los Angeles called Pasadena. Same place that Herbert W. Armstrong set up a little school. One of these societies or little mystery schools, and like a religious college, right? Herbert W. Armstrong started the Worldwide Church of God and told everybody had to go back to the laws of Moses. See? And all the Sabbaths and all the holy days, and I think they even did ritual sacrifices. Who knows? But here's the deal. Judge Rutherford was bringing Germans, Bavarian, Illuminati, Masonic Germans from Germany and taking them to this area around Los Angeles. So, why was Crowley in the area around Los Angeles? because someone was bringing him over here. It was somebody who had a headquarters, who was a billionaire at the time, or a big millionaire, which is today's money is a billionaire, that was one of these bloodlines that was bringing over his fellow elite brothers, the Bavarians, was bringing them over from Germany to the area around Los Angeles. And it was at that same time, that's when Crowley came over here and started the little cult there. L. Ron Hubbard, who started the Scientology, that's big in Hollywood. Anton LaVey, that started the Church of Satan. And Parsons, who started NASA, and on and on. All of these organizations, the CIA and everything, Silicon Valley's over there. All of those individuals that are making these big Silicon Valley technology companies coming from Germany, from the Wilhelm Institute, like Einstein was from, they were all brought over here in a concerted effort by individuals, starting from Charles Taze Russell, who ordered, commanded, authorized Judge Rutherford to start bringing them over. I'm telling you, friends, Crowley and his people started Hollywood, but they were all disciples of Judge Rutherford and Charles Taze Russell. And we will, as I said, throughout this video, present more and more evidence for this. I'm going to put links. This is an absolute truth. So all of these individuals, NASA started there at Pasadena. Scientists that, all these people with Project Paperclip. But before that time, before they were Nazis, there were what people just called Germans. They were Bavarians. Way back at World War I, it is recorded, you can look this up and find absolute verification of this, but Charles Taze Russell was bringing these Germans over here. He brought them to this area of Los Angeles. They had a scheme that they were going to build Hollywood there to, just like Jehovah's Witnesses, publish all this propaganda. Well, they were going to make it, they were going to go one step further. See, Russell's plan was to have this photodrama, motion pictures. You'll find evidence that in order to play the motion picture, he started off playing in theaters and stuff like this. But a lot of these people that were playing his photodrama of creation, which was the first kind of motion picture that the world had ever seen. And he was taking it to England and all around the world, and Germany and the United States, and taking to these theaters, and he was charging money. And then they decided that the best way to do it was to create just like they made this Watchtower Bible Tract Society to publish all these pamphlets. Well, they had decided that they were going to make a big machine, a city, and hire people, and a big to-do. And they had us vision, and they call it the Holy Wood. It was their great holy venture. Yeah, Ventura. It was their holy venture that these Germans like Crowley and Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard and Judge Rutherford, they had to go into cognito. They couldn't appear to the world to be in cahoots with these guys, because, of course, there was going to be a lot of satanic stuff. They wanted to go out in the open and promote Satanism, but they couldn't let Russell be associated with Satanism, so they just stuck Yahweh on him, and like he's the one that promoted Yahweh. And then they had all these guys were in the same area and going to the same teacher, right? So they all believed the same thing, but one pursued science and NASA, another one pursued the Church of Satan, another one pursued the Church of Yahweh, and Herbert Armstrong went back to all the laws and going back to the old covenant. But they were all, for sure, on the same page that they wanted to go back to the New World Order, get control of the world, and they're going to have to get rid of the concept of Jesus being the Lord. So this is why Yahweh, or Jehovah's Witnesses say, well, Jesus is not God, he's some angel. He's a son of God, but he's not the deity. They denied the Trinity. They denied eternal life, that life after death. All of these things exactly the way the rabbis believed. They never had any belief. There's no belief of eternal life. There's no promise of eternal life in the Old Testament. So when they started doing this distribution, they had to then, from the ground up, create everything that you have there at Hollywood. So look this up if you don't. Like I said, I'm going to have a link. Charles Russell invented the phonograph. He made phonograph companies. The records were invented by his people. If you look this up, you're going to see Charles Taze Russell's name on these companies. Never. But they were all Russellites. They were all people who lived there in the Brooklyn area. I mean, the Astoria building, that's that guy that they sunk at the Titanic, was just across the street there. The Rockefeller building's just down the street. Trump Plaza is just right across from the Rockefeller Plaza, which is right across from the United Nations, which is right across from the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. They all were in on it together, friends. And so they brought these Germans, their brothers, over. This was at the time Russell was dying, 1916. Well, that's when they were just promoting Crowley, who then took over. Judge Rutherford took over the Watchtower, and Crowley took over the Satanism, and they started Hollywood together. So they had this photo drama. They had to make it, they had to promote the, movie industry. So they created a couple of motion picture companies. I can't remember the exact names, like Mina and different names for these. The original motion picture companies that went to Hollywood were, and you can prove this, were created and made by Jehovah's Witnesses. They made printing companies and mailing companies and phonograph companies, engineering companies, everything you can imagine, all the companies that you've ever heard of. They were like the technology thing. I believe, and I haven't found actual evidence for this, but I believe they run Google and AT&T. They certainly are CEOs of all of these companies. But whoever they are, in other words, this little group of German Bavarians, and they're all together, and they came over, and it was Russell that was starting this Zionism with Zion's Watchtower, writing letters to the Rothschilds and promoting all of this and bringing them over here. So there's no way in Hades that they weren't working together. We know beyond a doubt that it was Jehovah's Witnesses that created the first motion picture companies. Now, over the years, various kinds and all different kinds, motion picture companies have come along. And we've got lots of individuals that today you wouldn't necessarily associate with Jehovah's Witnesses, but they were the ones that he brought over here in 1916. I'll leave the link, guys. I'm telling you, this might sound incredible, but it's the truth. And I understand that people aren't going to just jump on this right away. You're going to have more and more evidence. And we're going to put all the evidence that we can get over the next few, weeks and months or years, whatever it takes. And we're going to document all of this because we've got to know what's going on. We got to know, okay, what's going on. These people are working together. Why are they doing it? What is their goal? Well, their goal is to take over the world. Charles Taze Russell was a liar. He was a man who was hiding his tracks. He owned hundreds of buildings. I'll tell you, Charles Taze Russell owned the town of Binghamton, New York. I'll show evidence. When you look at that link, this guy's got the evidence and shows that he bought thousands of acres in Colorado. He had, acreages and real estate all around the world, buildings, companies, and he owned the entire town of Binghamton, New York, which is where this large Masonic temple is. Remember, He was a Mason. He admits that. It's there in New York. He owned the whole town. It was purchased by his organization. And right in the middle of that town is this great Masonic temple. And remember, we've got the evidence that Charles Taze Russell admits he was a Mason. He was buried, for the goodness sake, in a Masonic graveyard in Pennsylvania, under a pyramid with the Templar or Masonic sign on the pyramid. So, I've been finding this information over the last years or months or whatever, starting from when I was just a child, and I had these odd thoughts, and I heard these strange things, and I couldn't put it all together. But, I really started wondering about all of this when I was about 17, and I saw all these rich people, very powerful people, when this president of AT&T disfellowshipped me and my father. And I had some run-ins with him. He did not like me at all. I mean, he literally hated me. I went to his house one time on Folsom Lake. There's this area there that is for the rich and famous and powerful. And if you were to try and buy a home there, like in the suburbs, which there are really very few suburbs anywhere in that area, but it's a large lake, so there is towns nearby. There's a town called Folsom. Now, you could buy a house in Folsom, probably, maybe wouldn't be like elite prices, but, it's a very influential town, and, people like you and I couldn't even afford to live in the town, let alone this area where he was, out there on the lake. His place looked like a big golf course. I mean, you had to go through gates, and it was just a mansion. And when you entered into his home, you entered into a greeting room where, you sat on a chair. I remember how the couch was vinyl and it didn't look swank or luxurious. He tried to always appear to be very normal. He drove a white Buick, and no white walls. I mean, it's like no radio. He wouldn't let you could tell his wife was beaten down. She didn't speak unless spoken to. His son was so insecure he could barely even speak. Well, so was I. Most of Jehovah's Witnesses are. But I felt uncomfortable even being in that home, because I felt like, when you go to a door and the butler meets you, it's just like, no, I couldn't, in my own mind, reconcile this luxurious elite home with someone who's supposed to be a brother, a loving Christian disciple. And like I said, when I heard that he was the president of AT&T, I just couldn't reconcile this information. And so I worked on this for years and praying and trying to understand, but I never did at the time. Remember, we didn't have the internet. I couldn't look this stuff up. So it was just the other day that really got me going again, because there is somebody on YouTube that he talks about Jehovah's Witnesses, and he's got a channel about this. I guess he's an ex-Jehovah's Witness. And he is now come into some very definitive evidence. He's revealing that Jehovah's Witnesses own multi-billion-dollar companies. He says he can't name these companies, and because they're going through some law cases, some court cases with Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff like this. I don't know about all that. But one of these companies he was talking about was this company. It was a $40 billion company, but he said he couldn't reveal what it was. Well, listen, I already knew that. I can't say for sure that Hewlett-Packard, AT&T were all owned by Jehovah's Witnesses, but I'm telling you, where I was in Sacramento, it was right near where the Silicon Valley and everything. It was pretty evident that these guys were big shots coming into the meetings with rings on all their fingers, diamond rings, and, swanky tuxedos, and driving a new Lincoln Continental every day to the meeting. These guys were powerful people. My cousin married this one elder son in that congregation who owned a bank. He also started what is known, you probably heard of it today, but at that time he just created it. It was a frozen yogurt shop, and he made a big chain out of it, and then it started going nationwide, and he sold it. He had construction companies and stuff, but he owned a bank. I mean, this man was so wealthy, and he was a very nice guy, and his son was very nice, and my cousin married him. But all of these people are very powerful and wealthy, all of them. So there is no question in my mind, and well, there wasn't any question in my mind, but I needed evidence. I needed some concrete evidence as to what was really going on. And so then when I found this person that's been doing all of this digging and work to verify and prove, and in this stuff, there's no conjecture. Literally names, dates, places, times, everything. Guarantee. Click the link in the info box, friends, and see for yourself. Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, run by Charles Taze Russell, created Hollywood, created movie industries, created the phonograph companies, created record companies, created engine companies, created mailing companies, created real estate companies, real estate holdings. They own temples, they own churches, they own buildings, they swapped them around and sold them. There will be no way to tell just what the extent of Charles Taze Russell's wealth is. But you see, you'll always, when you get to digging, you'll always find a lot more stuff than what you ever bargained for. For instance, this guy named L. Ron Hubbard. A lot of people point out that, and I was just talking with a friend, a very close friend, Rob Lupine, that's been out there searching for the refuge, and he's trying to work that out. We'll give you some updates on that, guys. But I was just talking to him today, and we were talking about how L. Ron Hubbard has all these novels, like this fiction. And I've never read any of them. I did read Dianetics. It was interesting, but kind of like Charles Taze Russell, it was just wrong, but interesting. And some people might think it's right, but it's not really right. It's sort of, it's like coming from a mind that knows a lot of truth, but is trying to kind of basically hide and yet reveal to certain ones and hide from others, and couches it in all in symbols. So it's no wonder that he wrote all of these novels. L. Ron Hubbard writes all of these novels before he writes Scientology. Dianetics. Well, you see, Dianetics is an amazing novel. That's really what it is. They like to do a lot of writing, these guys, and symbology. And this is why they made Hollywood, so they could put their expertise to work. I guarantee it, these novels that L. Ron Hubbard was writing went into the movie industry, and they made scripts out of them. And they aren't just stories, just like this movie, The 100, that I keep talking about. It's not just a story. It is the scenario that Satan believes he's going to perform, or shall we say Yahweh, in his prophetic plans. This is what they plan on doing. Yahweh's coming in his wrath to destroy the world, but all of the little details that's written in Scripture, symbols and things, are spelled out in these movies that we're watching from Hollywood. And I would say that if you went back and read L. Ron Hubbard's books, you'd probably get an earful. If you've ever heard what, Scientologists believe, it's pretty weird, but they got some deity that they worship. I think his name is Zeno, or so. I don't even know or want to know. But whenever somebody starts exposing this, they're gone. Like, what's that lady named Rhimes or something? She used to be on one of those TV series, and she's married into the Bavarian family. This young woman, she woke up and she says, "Look, I don't want anything to do with this." And she started exposing Scientology. Well, guess what? She hasn't made any movies since then. She won't. She's out. So, anyway, it looks like we're coming up on an hour, and I was able to get a little of this juicy stuff in this particular video. Hopefully we'll cover more in videos to come, and we'll expose the whole ball of wax, friends. But get this video out to anyone who needs this information, which is basically everybody, but especially people that were ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, or, and they're trying to dig their way out of the chaos, out of the mind propaganda and the MK Ultra mind control that they were under for those years, and working their way out, trying to understand what is true and what isn't true, and, who are these people and what's going on. They need to know this. It's life or death for many of these people. They're struggling with their very existence. They hate themselves because they were taught to do that. They were told they were bad, and they have this guilt that's in their soul because they don't know that this deity that they thought that they were supposed to worship is really the devil, and he's a liar and the father of it. So please, friends, get this out to as many people as you can, people who are studying with witnesses or thinking about studying with them, or just people who want to know the truth. Anyway, I think I'll just go ahead and leave it there, guys. We'll probably do more of this soon, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.